And how long have you lived in Canton?
Approximately in the house on Fairview Road, approximately 11 years.
And in total, about how long have you been a resident in Canton before moving to Norwell?
Approximately 45 years.
And that address, that's 34 Fairview Road, is that right?
Yes.
And what, if any, relationship did that home or that residence have to your family before you and your wife and your kids moved?
My parents had lived at that residence prior to us.
So you had spent some of your childhood in that house as well?
Yes.
And do you work, sir?
I retired now. Retired.
What did you retire from?
Boston Police Department.
And how long were you a member of the Boston Police Department?
Approximately 30 years.
And within the Boston Police Department, were you assigned to any sort of specific unit or special duties?
My last assignment, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes. My last assignment was the Boston Police Fugitive Unit.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to January 28th, 2022. Do you recall that date?
Yes.
And do you recall what day of the week that was?
The 28th, I believe, was a Friday.
And when you first sort of got up on the 28th, where were you with that?
On the 28th, I was in New York City.
And why had you gone to New York?
So I went to New York for a funeral of a New York City police officer who was killed in the line of duty.
And about what time or what day did you go down to New York?
We went down the day before, so I believe that was Thursday.
Do you recall how it was that you got down there?
Yes, I flew to New York.
And when you say we, who, if anyone, went with you on that trip to New York?
I flew with a friend and a coworker named Eddie Hernandez.
So another Boston police officer?
Yes.
And down in New York at that funeral, were there other members of law enforcement that you knew or were familiar with working?
Yes, there were thousands of police officers that went to the funeral.
And included within those people, you mentioned you have a brother, Kevin, is that correct?
Yes.
Is he a police officer as well?
He is.
And where is he?
He's a detective in Canton, Massachusetts.
And was he down at this funeral as well?
He was.
And do you know a gentleman by the name of Brian Higgins?
Yes.
And was Brian Higgins at this funeral service as well?
Yes, he was.
And how is it that you know Brian Higgins?
So I know Brian Higgins initially from work, professional relationship. I've known him known of him for 10 or 15 years. And then the past few years, more recently, we worked together on a closer basis, and I became better friends with him.
And fair to say that when you became better friends with him, you also sort of socialized with him outside of work?
Yes.
Now, as far as your return trip from New York, what, if anything, happened?
On the return trip from New York, we drove back.
Why did you drive versus fly back when you flew?
So that weekend there was anticipated snowstorm, and I believe the flight that we were taking with JetBlue may have even been canceled. And Brian Higgins was leaving in a vehicle that morning, so we ended up driving, or after the funeral, we ended up driving with him.
And so it's yourself, Mr. Higgins, and then if anyone else went with you on the drive back to Massachusetts?
Eddie Hernandez and my brother Kevin.
And when you arrived back in Massachusetts, where was it sort of specifically that you went first?
I initially went to the Charlestown to pick up my vehicle.
Where was your vehicle parked in Charlestown?
It was at a police station, Charlestown Station. It's a satellite station located in Charlestown.
And that was in reference to proximity to the airport, is that correct?
Yes.
So that would have been Logan that you flew out of and intended to fly back into?
Logan Airport, yes.
And after you were dropped off with your vehicle, what kind of vehicle was that?
That was a Ford Edge.
Was that a personal vehicle or work vehicle?
Work vehicle.
And so you get dropped back off at your work vehicle. Where did you go?
So from Charlestown, I drove back towards the Canton area, and I met Brian Higgins at a restaurant bar called the Hillside.
Is that in Canton as well?
I believe so. It's on the Canton Milton line. I believe it sits in Canton.
And what was the purpose of you and Mr. Higgins going?
After the drive home, he asked if I wanted to get some food and stop off, and I said yes.
And if you know about what time was it that you got to the Hillside with Mr. Higgins?
I want to say around 9:30, perhaps. Not entirely sure.
When you arrived there, what did you do?
So we went into the establishment and had a drink and hung out for a while.
And did you order any food there?
I did not. I believe Brian did, though.
And while you were at the Hillside with Mr. Higgins, what, if any, communication did you receive from your wife, Nicole?
So around that time, I talked to my wife, I think more than once, and she had let me know that her and a few people were at another location in Canton, and she had asked if I wanted to come by and see them.
What was that other location?
That other location was the Waterfall.
Is that an establishment you were familiar with?
Yes,
You've been there before several times?
I had been there before, yes.
And so you drove then from the Hillside to the Waterfall?
Yes.
About how long a drive is that?
Maybe 7 minutes, between less than 10 minutes.
And so as you're going on that drive, the snow that was anticipated coming in, had that anything related to that started yet?
No, I at that time, I don't recall any snow.
And in relation to the Waterfall, where did you park?
In the parking lot for the Waterfall, which is adjacent to the door to go inside. So it's to the left if you're looking at the building from Washington Street.
And when you come into, now, when you left the Hillside, Mr. Higgins stayed there?
Yes, he stayed.
And when you came into the Waterfall, who, if anyone, was there?
So when I walked in and I saw my wife, my oldest daughter, Caitlin, I saw my brother, Chris, his wife, Julie, my brother-in-law, Matt, and my sister-in-law, Jen.
And your brother-in-law, Matt, and your sister-in-law, Jen, their last name is McCabe, is that right?
Yes.
And if you could just explain to the jury sort of how you were related as far as what year it is that you know.
So my brother Chris, his wife is Julie, and then Nicole's sister is Jen, and then Jen's husband is Matt McCabe.
And is it fair to say that you've probably known Jennifer McCabe about as long as you've known your wife, Nicole?
Yeah, since she was a little kid, maybe 6, 7 years old.
And you see these people, and where are they sort of situated in the one?
So there was a high top table kind of in the front area as you walk in, kind of in the middle of the room. And everybody was just kind of around the high top table.
And what, if anything, was there as far as live entertainment at the Waterfall that night?
There was a band playing there.
And with reference to the people that you've just spoken, as far as your wife and your daughter specifically, were they at the high top table closer to the band or further away?
So they were on the side of the table that's, I guess, closer to the door as you come in. And then there were other people on the opposite side of the table that was closer to the bar area.
And after you came into the Waterfall, went up to the group of your family, what did you order anything? What did you do?
Yeah, I kind of just said hi to everybody. I don't recall exactly, but I'm sure I ordered a drink. And then just kind of hung out with family and friends.
And following your arrival, who, if anyone else, showed up and eventually sort of joined your group?
There was another couple at the table. I don't know if they were there initially when I walked in, but there was another couple at the table whom I believed were there before I got there, but I just don't know what their names were.
Do you know how they were related to your group?
I don't. I think they're friends with Jen and Matt, but I'm not 100% sure.
And where were they situated in reference to where your wife and your daughter were?
So they were, I believe, to the right of this pretty large high top table.
So towards the other end of the table.
Yes.
And if you recall, what were you drinking that night?
I don't recall. I usually drink beer, Mick Ultra, but I can't remember that night what I was drinking.
Now, following your arrival there and you meet up with your family, were there other friends or family that eventually showed up at this establishment and joined you?
Yes.
And who were they, sir?
So after I was there, maybe about a half hour, Brian Higgins arrived at the location.
And if you recall, what, if any, sort of communication did you have with Mr. Higgins, or how did Mr. Higgins know to come to the waterfall specifically?
Because while we were at the hillside, I had mentioned that I was going to be leaving to go to the waterfall to see my family who was already there. And I invited him to come by if he wanted to.
And at any point in time, sort of throughout the course of the day, yourself and Mr. Higgins, you had each other's sort of information and cell numbers, things like that?
Yes.
And at any point in time throughout the course of the day or the evening, did you have occasion to text or phone call or anything with Mr. Higgins?
Yes.
Now, after Mr. Higgins arrives, who, if anyone else, came into the waterfall and joined you?
Probably after about a half hour later from Brian Higgins arriving, John O'Keefe came into the waterfall with the defendant.
And that would have been probably about 11 o'clock, is that correct?
Yes.
And John O'Keefe, if you could tell the jury, well, first, did you know John O'Keefe?
So I knew John O'Keefe, but not well. I had only met him 2 times prior to that night. But I knew him to be a Boston cop, and I knew of him, and I knew some things about him.
And as far as the Boston Police Department, it's a fairly large department. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And about how many members or how many people on Boston?
Depending on the year, I mean, sometimes it's upwards of 2,000.
And through the course of your work over the decades that you worked with the Boston Police, did you ever work with or have any professional sort of interaction with John O'Keefe?
No, I don't remember working with him directly within the Boston Police Department.
Were you aware of sort of what his role was or what he did within the Boston Police?
Yes, I knew where he worked.
And where did he work?
I believe he worked at the SORI unit, which is the Sex Offender Registry unit.
And you mentioned just briefly before that you had heard of Mr. O'Keefe, correct?
Yes.
And what is it that you had heard?
Well, I knew him to be a friend of my sister-in-law, Jen, and her husband, Matt. I knew him to be a friend of my brother, Chris, and my sister-in-law, Julie. I knew him to be a friend of my brother, Kevin's. I've heard his name mentioned multiple times, and I knew that he had a horrible couple tragedies in his family, and I knew that he stepped up and decided to take care of his niece and his nephew when they tragically lost their parents. And
how would you sort of describe your relationship with John O'Keefe at this time, January 28, 2020?
Although I didn't know him well, I considered him to be a friend, and our relationship was very, very good, cordial, and I considered him to be somebody that I could hang out with and have a good time with.
Now, you mentioned that Mr. O'Keefe walked in around 11 o'clock to the waterfall with the defendant, just for clarity purposes. You're referring to Karen Reed, is that correct?
Yes.
And do you see Ms. Reed in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Could you just identify as to where she's seated or an article of clothing?
Sure. She's a female at the table in front of me with a black top on, long sleeve.
Just ask the record reflect identification. Identify the word.
Yes.
Now, with regard to Ms. Reed, had you met Ms. Reed prior to that date of January 28th?
I believe I had met her one time a week prior.
And do you recall any specifics about that meeting or how it is that you came to meet her about a week prior?
I do.
And if you could explain to the jury what those circumstances were.
Sure. I met her at the Hillside. I believe she was there with John a week prior.
And as far as your interaction with her on that particular evening, anything significant stand out to you?
No.
Now, when they came in, and by day, I'm sorry, I mean, Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed came into the waterfall, where did they go in relation to where you were sort of situated at the high top?
So I don't remember them actually walking in the front door. I remember them being in my general area at some point. And they went towards the other side of the table where my sister-in-law, Jen, and my brother-in-law, Matt, were standing.
And at some point, did either or both of them make their way down towards your side of the table, your side of the table, excuse me, and what, if any, interaction did you have?
Yes, I remember having an interaction, or more than one interaction, with John. Came over to say hello, and we had some conversation. Not for too long, but yes.
Do you remember anything specific about that conversation or anything stand out to you?
No, I think we were talking mostly about work. I think he let me know that the sergeant, I guess, that worked in his unit was leaving, or left, or transferred. And, you know, he was jokingly saying that I should try to get a job over it where he works.
And as far as the defendant, Ms. Reed, what, if any, conversation or interaction did you have?
I don't remember having any interaction with her whatsoever.
Now, as far as when Mr. O'Keefe came over, what, if anything, did you observe as far as what he was wearing, clothing, anything like that?
I don't really remember what he was wearing for clothing. I believe he had a baseball hat on. Other than that, I can't remember his clothing.
And specifically, do you recall anything as far as like a winter jacket or a big coat or anything like that?
I can't say. I wasn't really paying attention to what he was wearing. I don't know.
And as far as just his general features, as far as what you could observe, what, if any, sort of injuries or anything did you observe on his person at that time?
I observed injuries at that time.
And over the course of the evening, you had a couple of interactions with Mr. O'Keefe, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe we talked a few times, kind of hung out, stood next to each other for a while, like you normally would do at a bar restaurant.
And is the band playing while this is going on, is that correct?
Yes, the band was there. You know, I believe they took a break here and there, but they were there for the night.
Now, Mr. Albert, how would you describe sort of the general mood or demeanor of the group while you were at the waterfall night?
In one word, it would be fun. Everybody was in a great mood. People were getting along. It was friends and family, and it was just seemed like a great night.
And do you recall about what time things started to wind down or things started to sort of end for the evening?
I believe the band stopped playing probably, you know, close to 12, and things started winding down, you know, a little before 12.
And if you know, from the group that you just described at the high top table that you were a part of, what was sort of the order in which people left the establishment, starting with the first?
So I believe the first to leave was myself, my wife, Nicole, my daughter, Caitlin, and Brian Higgins left at that time as well.
And had anybody left from your group prior to when, I'm sorry. So the bar starts to wind down around 12, correct?
Yes.
Prior to the bar winding down, had anybody from your group left before that?
I didn't remember or notice that. I'm not sure.
And so the first to sort of leave from your group when the bar is winding down is yourself, Mr. Higgins, your wife, and your daughter.
Yes.
And when you exit the establishment, where do you go?
Into the parking lot to my vehicle.
Let me take it back just for a moment, back into the waterfall. During the course of the evening, what, if any, conversation was had by you or amongst the group that you observed as far as where to go next, or what were you doing following the waterfall?
Okay, so there was some conversation relative to people going to my brother's sub shop, which is across the street. And he was maybe going to make some pizzas for people if they were hungry. So that was discussed.
And did that end up happening?
No, some people didn't want to go over there, and for whatever reason, it just didn't happen.
And beyond that, was there anything else that was discussed as far as where to go after the waterfall?
Yes.
And what was that?
So it ended up being my son Brian's 23rd birthday. So at 12 o'clock, he would be 23. So there was some discussion about if anybody wanted to go by the house to kind of say happy birthday to him. And I know my wife, Nicole, mentioned it to Jen and Matt, and it was said, I believe, in the group where we were standing.
And so was that sort of an open invitation that was extended to pretty much anybody that was around the high top table?
Yeah, sure. Anybody that was there was welcome to come by if they wanted to.
And as far as you knew, as far as awareness of who was coming over to your house at 34th Fair, who from the group were you aware of coming over?
I don't really remember the responses. I don't think I knew for sure if anybody was going to come, except Brian Higgins said he would come by.
And he had left around the same time as you.
Yes.
And had Brian Higgins been to your house before?
I believe he was at my house for a high school graduation party.
And high school graduation probably in the spring, is that correct?
It would have been the summer prior to that time. So my twins were graduating high school, and we had something at the house, and it was spring, summer of the year prior.
And around that time, so that would have been 2021, is that correct?
Yes.
So around that time, there was still sort of vestiges or whatever of the COVID pandemic, is that correct?
Yes, actually, that was just getting over, I think.
And so where was this graduation party at your house? Was that inside your house or outside your house or something?
It was actually out back. It was more of a cookout type thing.
And so as far as you can recall, prior to January 28, 2022, had Mr. Higgins been physically sort of inside your house for anything beyond using the bathroom?
Besides that graduation party, I don't believe he had ever been at my house. I'm sure he walked into the house, to use the bathroom or something that day, but I didn't really notice, whether he went in there or not.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, there's just a couple of very short clips that I'd like to publish with this witness in reference to what's been marked as Exhibit 53, video from the waterfall. And Ms. Gilman, with reference to channel 3, if I could have the fourth video now. And Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to fast forward to 18 minutes and 50 seconds. Now, Mr. Albert, direct your attention up to the screen to your right here. Do you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes.
What do you recognize that?
The waterfall.
And this is, at least according to the timestamp, about 11:57 p.m. on the 28th. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what's up there is that, to the best of your recollection, a fair and accurate portrayal of what the inside of the waterfall looked like, absent sort of the quality of the video.
Yes.
And sir, I believe there should be a laser pointer on the desk before you. If you just press that button and point at the screen. What I'm going to ask you to do is if you could draw the jury's attention to who, if anyone, within this sort of still frame of the video that you recognize, if any.
With the time band across the top there, I can't really. I can see some people around the table that we were standing, which would be this table area here. Tough for me to say from here who everybody is. I believe that's Brian Higgins there, but I'm not 100%.
Ms. Gilman, if you could play this, and what I'm going to ask you to ultimately play is up to the 19 minutes and 58 seconds. Ms. Gilman, if you could pause it there. Now, Mr. Albert, from what you observe up there, as far as the door that you came in and came out of on that evening, do you see generally where that door is?
Yes,
And if you could direct the jury's attention to where on the video screen it is.
doors this way.
And from just prior to when this video went out, stopped at the 11:57 and 52nd mark, you see a group sort of making their way towards that front door, is that correct?
Yes,
And from this vantage point, are you able to recognize any of the people in that group that made their way towards it?
yes, I believe I saw my wife, my daughter here maybe, and then I think I'm over here. But again, it's a little grainy and I can't really see great from here. And I saw Brian Higgins, but I don't know if he's in here somewhere.
Thank you, Ms. Gilman. If you could just press play again for about 30 some odd seconds. Thank you, Ms. Gilman. You could take that down, and then Ms. Gilman, if I could ask for one other video from channel 1, the second one down. If I could ask you to fast forward that to about 5 minutes and 10 seconds. And ultimately, I'm going to ask you to play it from 5 minutes and 10 seconds to 5 minutes and 50 seconds. If you could press play now. Thank you, Mr. Now, generally speaking, what was just played up on the screen, Mr. Albert, do you recognize what that is?
Yeah, it looks like the exit of the waterfall, and we're kind of walking out.
The same group that was just walking through the front door, now walking out the front door and into the parking lot?
Yes, and I believe there was somebody else there. I don't know if it was somebody from the band or looks like a different person out front there.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Gilman, you can take that. Now, Mr. Albert, when you get to the parking lot, you get in the vehicle and you drive to your house, is that right?
Yes,
Okay, and specifically, you're the one driving, is that correct?
yes.
And who is in your car with you on the drive back?
My wife Nicole and my daughter Caitlin.
And about how far a drive is it from the waterfall to your house?
I would say five minutes.
And the weather, as far as when you walk out, get in the car, and then start driving, what, if anything, had changed about the weather from the time you came into the waterfall to the time you came out?
Yeah, so it had started snowing a little bit more heavily. You can kind of see that on that second video. So the ground was beginning to be, coated, it looked like.
So coating on the ground, but could you, as you were driving, could you still sort of see the blacktop of the roadway?
I believe so, yes.
Now, you get to your house, and what, if anything, happens sort of as you're coming into your driveway?
It looks like that, had looked like Brian had gotten there first, Brian Higgins, and he was backing out, so I could pull my car in.
And as far as the vehicle that Mr. Higgins was driving on that evening from the waterfall, was that the same vehicle that he had driven with you back from New York?
No.
And what kind of vehicle was the one that he was driving back from New York, and what kind of vehicle was the one he was driving that night?
So the one back from New York, he was driving a full-size pickup truck. I'm not sure what make or model, but it had a cab on the back, and I believe it's gray. And then that night later in the night at the waterfall, he had a Jeep Wrangler vehicle that I believe is white, but I'm not 100%.
So he had arrived at your house before you, is that correct?
Yes.
And you said it looked like he had done something to the driveway?
He may have skimmed, he had a plow on his truck, and I think he may have skimmed the driveway and then pulled out, and then we pulled in.
And as far as vehicles at your house, how many, around this time in January 22, between yourself, your wife, kids, how many vehicles did you have?
I believe 3.
And what type of vehicles and who was sort of the primary driver with regard to those?
So I had we had a Ford Explorer, a Cadillac SUV. It's a smaller SUV that my wife Nicole drives, and the Ford Edge that I already spoke of, and I believe we had one more vehicle that one of my kids drove at that time. I'm just trying to remember. It might have been an Escape, maybe a Ford Escape. Someone could have had that at college. Someone could have had that at school. So I don't remember if it was there that night or not.
So all the vehicles were essentially like SUV type vehicles.
Yes, we didn't own any sedans or any cars.
Now, as far as when you pull into the driveway, the house at 34 Fairview has a 2-car garage.
Yes.
And is the garage something that you or other members of your family would utilize as far as parking the vehicles?
No. So unfortunately, we didn't use the garage a lot because we kind of used it for storage, and we had a lot of stuff out there. So we very seldom used it.
And if you recall, as you're pulling into the driveway, did you pull into the left side, the right side, or?
I believe I pulled in on the left side of the driveway.
And you mentioned that Mr. Higgins had sort of scooped with the plow like in the driveway and then parked on the street. Do you recall where in relation to your house or your driveway he parked?
So no, I don't remember where Brian Higgins parked. I remember him pulling out so I could pull in, and then I didn't really see where he parked.
And you then go into your house, is that correct?
Yes.
And are all of you, and by all of you, I mean yourself, your wife, your daughter, and Mr. Higgins all sort of coming in around the same time?
Basically, yes.
When you come into your house, do you recall how many doors in the front of the house are there?
So we have 2 front doors.
And one would be sort of by some steps, is that correct?
There's actually steps on both doors, but one of them is, I guess, considered the front door with a large set of steps.
And they would be sort of brick steps, is that right?
Yes.
And that leads into a foyer area of the house?
Yes.
And the other door, where does that lead?
So the other door opens up right into the we call it the family room, but right into the family room den area.
And do you recall specifically which door you utilized on that evening to go into the house?
I believe I went in the door on the right, which goes into the den. Not really sure what other doors people used.
And when you came into the house, who, if anyone, was present beyond the people that you would come in with?
So my son Brian was home. He had 2 friends, I believe, Julie and Sarah.
And these were people that you had known as friends of your son from prior vacations?
I didn't know Sarah. I had met Julie once or twice.
And as you were walking in, who, if anyone else, beyond your son and his two friends?
And my nephew Colin.
That'd be Colin Albert, is that correct?
Yes, Chris and Julie's son Colin.
About how old was Colin around that?
I believe he was just about 18, 17, 18. He's in high school.
So you're still in high school at the time?
Yes.
And when you walk in, where was Colin in relation to your son and the two girls that he was with?
He was just kind of standing in the kitchen with Brian and the two girls. Brian and the two girls were at the kitchen table, and Colin was just kind of standing there.
And from the time that you arrived home, how long was Colin at your house?
No more than 5 minutes.
And where did he go?
He left. He just said he was getting picked up.
He said he was getting picked up, and a few minutes later he left your house.
Yes, I went and used the bathroom. I came out and he was gone.
Now, at some point subsequent to that, who, if anyone else, arrived or showed up at your house?
After Colin left the house,
Yes.
nobody else arrived at the house.
Your sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, at some point, did they come by?
Yes, I thought you were referring to after they showed up.
So when, my question is, do you know whether or not when Jennifer McCabe and Matthew McCabe arrived at your house, was Colin still there?
I don't know if he was still there or not. I believe he left before they came, but I'm not 100%.
So you come home and you go to use the restroom, is that correct?
Yes,
And when you go to use the restroom, Colin's there, correct?
yes,
And the McCabe's are not?
they are not.
When you come back from the restroom, Colin's not there,
Yes, Colin was gone.
and the McCabe's are there?
No, I don't believe they had arrived yet.
So they arrived sometime after Colin had left.
Yes.
And over the course of that evening of the 28th into the early morning of the 29th, did anybody else come into your house, or did anybody else come into your house at any point?
No.
Now, in addition to yourself, your wife, and your son, did you have any pets at that time?
Yeah, yes, we did.
And what kind of pet did you
We had a dog.
have? And what kind of dog was that?
So it was a German Shepherd mix,
And what was the name of the dog?
Chloe.
And how long had you and your family had the dog?
We had Chloe for approximately, at that time, maybe 6 or 7 years.
Do you recall how you got the dog or where you got the dog from?
The dog was from a shelter in Dallas, Texas, actually.
So essentially a rescue dog, is that correct?
Yes, rescue dog.
And when you got home after you went to the bathroom, what, if anything, did you do with reference to the dog?
At some point, I went upstairs to grab the dog and let her out back to use the bathroom.
And so when you would take the dog out, or when anybody would take the dog out to use the bathroom, how would that be accomplished? So what I'm asking is, would the dog be on a leash, or would it be let out in the yard? Or
No, so the backyard's fenced in, so I would open up the back door and she can go out, use the bathroom, and come back inside.
so the entirety of your backyard, that's a fenced-in backyard, is that correct?
Yes.
And beyond that fence, as far as the abutting, what sort of abuts the back of your property?
So behind the back fence, there's a railroad track. I believe it's a commuter rail that's behind the fence.
And is there any sort of opening or way to open the back of that fence to get in sort of any wooded area between your house and the tracks?
Yes, there's a gate back there.
And the gate, as far as when you let the dog out in the back that night, did you stay with the dog while the dog was outside?
I stayed at the doorway, and the dog went to the bathroom and then ran right back in.
So about how long was the dog outside?
She was out back for maybe 2 or 3 minutes.
Went outside, went to the bathroom, came back in?
Yes.
And when the dog came back inside the house, where did the dog go?
So the dog kind of walked around in the kitchen for a few minutes, and then I took her upstairs.
And when you took her upstairs, where upstairs did you take her?
So the dog liked to sleep in our room, mine and my wife's room. So a lot of times she would go up there on her own. Sometimes I would walk her up, and I walked her up to our bedroom.
And at any point in time for the remainder of that evening or the early morning, did the dog go outside at all?
No.
And you mentioned that there are train tracks that run sort of close to your property, is that correct?
Yes.
And is that just the commuter rail, or does the Acela go by, or anything else?
I believe there is, in addition to the commuter rail, there's other trains that use that track, yes.
And how often, sort of on a daily basis, do trains go by your house on Fairview Road?
So it depends, I guess, schedule-wise, if it's the middle of the week or if it's the weekend. But, on any given day, they can go by 5 or 6 times, morning, more towards the rush hour times, morning, at night, and then sometimes at night and sometimes during the day. So really all day and night.
And when the trains go by, about how loud is that as far as from your house?
So it's loud, although having lived there for a period of time, I feel like at least I'm kind of immune to the sound. I don't really hear it as much anymore.
So something essentially based on how long you lived there, you really don't even hear it anymore?
Not really, no.
Now, you let the dog out, you bring the dog back upstairs, and then where did you go?
So after I brought the dog up, I just came back down and hung out with everybody else.
And where within your house was everybody else sort of situated?
So everybody was in the kitchen, and then we have a connecting dining room, but it's opened. It's only, a difference of 5 feet. And then we have the family room den that's adjacent to the kitchen, but they're all close proximity.
So the kitchen and the dining room are sort of the same room, is that correct?
Yes.
And as far as what if anything is between the kitchen and dining room and the living room that you were talking about?
So there's a wall, but there's a doorway. So there's really no barrier to go from the kitchen dining room into the family room.
So if somebody's standing in the family room and somebody's standing in the kitchen dining area, they can sort of see each other?
Yes.
Now, in the kitchen area where everybody was, or in the kitchen dining room area, do you recall sort of where people were and what they were doing around that time?
Yeah, I think people were just sitting around, having drinks. Someone had a speaker and they were listening to music and just talking and hanging out.
And as far as the sort of group and sort of the overall mood or demeanor of the group back at the house, how would you describe that?
Pleasant, fun. Everybody was having a good time. We were wishing Brian a happy birthday, and everything was going great.
And at any point in time, while this was all going on, did you, other than your situation with the dog, was there any point in time where you were not with the group in the kitchen dining area?
No, I was there basically for the whole night, except I think at one point I may have shown Brian Higgins some photos that were in my son's room that were upstairs.
And what kind of photos are we talking?
So my son Jack, who's one of the twins, was in the Marines, or is in the Marines, and we had put some plaques and some stuff in his room upstairs. And Brian Higgins was prior military, as am I, and I thought he would want to see the photos, so I had him look at them.
And that period of time that you were outside of sort of the kitchen dining room area looking at the photos with Mr. Higgins, about how long a period of time was we talking?
Very, very quickly, 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes.
Now, at some point over the course of that morning, things started to sort of wind down at your home. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And about what time was that things started to wind down and people started to leave?
I think Brian left at around 1:30. I believe he was the first to leave. And then others left after that.
When you say others left after that, after Mr. Higgins left your house, where did you go?
So after Brian left, I had gone upstairs, and hung out and watched TV up in my bedroom.
You had a long day that day, is that fair to say?
Yes, I had the funeral in New York that morning. We had the long drive back, and we had been out, and now we're hanging out at my house, and it had been a long day. Yes.
And so, at any point in time, after you went upstairs after Mr. Higgins left, did you come back downstairs at all?
Yes, I think I popped back down at one point just to see kind of how long people were going to be there, and then went back up.
When you popped back down, how many people were still there?
I think Jen and Matt was still there, and the two Brian's two friends were still there, and my daughter Caitlin.
Now, as far as beyond Mr. Higgins when he left, was there any other occasion that you can recall where somebody from your house went outside and then came back?
Yes.
Who was that?
So while we were hanging out, I believe the girl Julie Nagel's brother came to the house. I never saw him, but I could hear them saying that he was out front. And I think Julie Nagel had walked outside to talk to him.
And at some point after she walked outside, she came back inside, is that correct?
Yes.
And about how long a period of time did you know was she outside?
I didn't really pay attention to how long it was. I don't think it was that long.
And as far as the outside of your house, after you had let Chloe out and back in, what, if any, observations did you make outside of your house? Did you look out? Did you see anything outside of the house?
Just that we have windows in the back of the kitchen area. You could just see that it was snowing.
Is that sort of like a bay window in the kitchen?
Yes, it's a large bay window in the kitchen.
When you look out the bay window in the kitchen, what part of your property does that face?
So it's the backyard. You can see the backyard. The bulkhead is right under that bay window, and you pretty much have a view of the whole backyard if it's in the daytime. But it was obviously a little dark.
So can you see the front of the house at any part of the front of the house when you're looking out the bay window?
No.
So at any point in time over the course of the evening, did you look out front to see anything out in front of your house?
No.
Now, at any point in time over the course of the evening, did you hear anything from front of the house, the back of the house, anywhere around the house that drew your attention outside?
No.
Now, at any point in time during the evening, did you know or did you become aware of either John O'Keefe or the defendant Karen Reed coming over to your house?
No.
And at no point in time over the course of that evening or the early morning there, did John O'Keefe or Karen Reed physically come into your house?
John O'Keefe and Karen Reed never entered my house.
And so you go up to bed, and the group is still sort of downstairs, is that correct?
Yes.
And at some point, your wife, Nicole, you share a bedroom with, does she come upstairs?
Yes.
And do you know about what time that was?
It was probably 2-ish. Not exactly sure, but around 2 or 2 o'clock.
And the doors to your house, as far as the front doors and the back doors, what is sort of the situation with regard to locking the doors before everybody goes to bed?
Can you rephrase that?
With when you lived at 34 Fairview Road, there were a number of doors to the house, including 2 doors in the front, correct?
Yes.
And how was that? Let me ask you this. Would it be unusual for the front doors of your house to remain unlocked overnight?
No.
Is that something that happened on occasion where people were supposed to lock the doors but didn't lock the doors?
Yes, from time to time, the doors, people would just forget to lock them, or we just didn't lock them.
And so your wife comes up to your bedroom about 2 a.m. or so. As far as you knew, was everybody else had left the house at that point?
Yes.
And you're up for a period of time with your wife, is that correct?
Yes.
And over the course of that time, so sort of following 2 o'clock in the morning, do you recall any sort of phone call or phone conversation with Mr. Higgins or anybody else?
No.
And at some point you fall asleep, do you recall about when that was?
don't, but it was obviously after 2 because that's when she came upstairs, watched TV and kind of hung out together for a while, and then went to sleep.
And the dog, Chloe, was she up in the room where you had brought her up before?
Yes,
She was there overnight, is that correct?
yes.
Now, turning your attention to later on that morning or beginning of that morning, daytime morning, of January 29th. Obviously, at some point you wake up, correct?
Yes.
And what is it that wakes you up on that morning?
I was awoken that morning to my sister-in-law, Jen, had burst into my room.
And do you know about what time that was?
It was early in the morning, between 6 and 6:30, I would say.
And fair to say that's not a normal occurrence?
No,
And when she burst into your room, can you describe her demeanor or sort of how she appeared when she first came?
she was very upset, almost hysterical.
And what, if anything, did she say when she came in?
She said something to the effect, John is dead.
Objection.
Next question, please, Steve. Bushway Foundation.
Did you know who she was referring to when she initially comes into you?
I initially did not.
And at some point during the course of that conversation, does Ms. McCabe make reference to going downstairs?
Yes.
And prior to that, not the content of the conversation, but as far as the length of the conversation, about how long was that length of the conversation that occurred in your bedroom between yourself, Ms. McCabe, and your wife?
Probably a minute.
And the demeanor that you described as far as Ms. McCabe was concerned is almost hysterical. Was that continuous throughout that initial conversation?
Yes. She was very upset.
And who, if anyone, did she indicate was downstairs, or why did you go downstairs?
She said that the police,
Objection.
This I'm going to allow in that foundation.
Go ahead.
she said that the police were downstairs.
And so you went downstairs to talk to them.
Yes.
And when you go downstairs, what do you see when you get to sort of the bottom of the stairs?
I saw a Canton police officer downstairs.
So inside your house at that point?
Yes.
And the door to your house, was it still open or shut or something?
I don't remember.
And the Canton police officer that's inside your home, did you recognize him?
Yes.
And who did you recognize him?
Last name, Lank. So Officer Lank.
Was he someone that you were familiar with?
I knew who he was. Yes.
Did you socialize or were you friends or anything like that?
I didn't socialize with him. I knew him to be a Canton police officer. I had met him, multiple times, and I knew him to know my brother Chris.
And so knew him is essentially what I'm asking, knew him in a professional capacity, personal capacity, or a little bit of both?
I would say more of a professional capacity, and I knew of him, but did not hang out with him socially.
And initially, when you first see Officer Lang, is he by himself, or who, if any, other officers are with?
I believe initially he was by himself.
Did another officer join yourself and Officer Lang at some point?
Yes, I believe another officer came into the house.
You know who that officer is?
I don't.
And as far as them coming into your house, they were welcome in your house? You didn't say get out or close the door or anything like that?
No, of course they were welcome in my house.
And where did you go with the officer sort of in your house? Where did you spoke with the officer, I'm presuming?
Yes, we spoke in the kitchen area.
And when you're speaking with the officer in the kitchen area, who is there?
So my wife, Nicole, her sister, Jen, and I believe Jen's husband, Matt, arrived almost the same time that I came downstairs, maybe a minute after.
And how long a period of time?
remember the exact time. I wouldn't want to guess. I don't remember. He was 10, 15, 20 minutes maybe initially.
And when you say initially, was there a subsequent conversation that occurred after that?
Yes. The Officer Lank returned to the house sometime after that.
And when he returned sometime after that, was he alone or was there another officer?
I believe that time he was with Lieutenant Gallagher, perhaps.
And were you familiar with Lieutenant Gallagher prior to that morning?
I knew who Lieutenant Gallagher was on a professional level. I had not hung out with him on a social level.
And again, they were welcomed into your home and you spoke with them, is that correct?
Yes, the second time they were there, they were invited back to the house via a phone call.
And that second conversation within your house, where did that?
Same area, family room, kitchen area.
And if you know about how long a period of conversation was that second come back to the house?
That may have been longer, maybe a half hour.
Now, going back to sort of that initial conversation, as far as, so it's yourself, it's Mr. and Mrs. McCabe, your wife, and then the police, is that correct?
Myself, my wife Nicole, my sister-in-law Jen, her husband Matt had arrived, and the police, yes.
And in between that first speaking with the police and the second time that the police came back to your house, who, if anyone, did you call or notify in regard to the situation that was going on in front of you?
I called Brian Higgins
Why did you call Brian?
because I think it was important for him to know what was going on and that what had happened.
And as far as you knew with reference to Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed, what, if any, relationship, friendship, anything were you aware of between Mr. Higgins and either Mr. O'Keefe or Ms.
I was not aware too much about a relationship with Brian and either person. Brian had mentioned maybe even that night that he was friendly and knew John. I knew of no relationship between Brian and the defendant.
And following your conversation with Mr. Higgins, who, if anyone else, came over your house?
So Brian Higgins eventually came over to my house. And my sister-in-law Julie also arrived at my house.
And do you know why your sister-in-law Julie came by your house?
Yes.
And why was that?
So she has a routine that when it's someone's birthday, she likes to come by and bring like coffee and donuts. So it was Brian's birthday that night. So my sister-in-law Julie was coming by to drop off some donuts and coffee, I think.
And where was Julie when you first saw her that morning?
She was out front in the driveway.
And what, if anything, did you ask Julie to do when you saw her out in the driveway?
I asked her to come inside.
And when she came inside, is that when you informed her of what had happened?
Yes, I don't know if it was necessarily me that informed her, but people that were there were explaining to her what happened. It was a very, very chaotic, unbelievably chaotic morning.
And as far as when that was described to your sister-in-law Julie, how would you describe sort of her demeanor or her reaction to the news regarding Mr. O'Keefe?
Shock. That's how I would describe it. Everybody's reaction that morning was utter shock. And she was upset and looked very, very in shock.
And so the second time that the Canton police officers come back to your home, who was there at that point?
I know I was there for sure. My wife, Nicole, Jen, her husband, Matt. Brian Higgins may have been there at that time. And I'm not sure about Julie. Julie at one point left the house and I think she came back later in the morning, but so I'm not sure if she was there.
And at some point when your sister-in-law Julie came back to your house, who, if anyone, came to your house with her?
Her husband, my brother Chris, who's her husband.
Was this before or after the second time that the police had been in?
I believe they came back after the second time, but I'm not 100% sure. The first time that Julie came with the coffee, the police were not there.
Now, when you first sort of get up, you come downstairs and the police they're basically in your doorway, is that correct?
Yes.
Could you see outside as far as what was going on outside at that time?
Not from downstairs, but I had looked out the window after Jen had come up into my room and explained what had happened, and before I went downstairs.
When you looked out your window from your bedroom, what did you see?
I could see at least one police vehicle. I could see that there was something going on out front, and that was about it. And I just went straight downstairs.
At that time that you looked out your window, did you see either an ambulance or a fire truck out there?
I don't remember if I saw a ambulance. There were emergency vehicles out there, but I can't remember exactly which types.
And at any point in time, at that time or subsequent throughout the course of the day, did you go out to that area of your yard where you saw the cruisers and the sort of lights?
No.
And why?
I didn't see that there was a reason to go out to that area. The police had already been in my house. They had already talked to us about what was going on. It was a snowstorm at that point. They were trying to conduct an investigation, and I didn't want to interfere with it or have anything to do with it.
Now, as far as what you're learning, sort of when Jennifer McCabe first comes sort of verging in into your bedroom at 6 to 6:30 in the morning, at any point around there were you made aware of where John O'Keefe was at that point?
Yes.
And what were you made aware of?
I was made aware that he was taken to the hospital.
So by the time that you're awoken by Mrs. McCabe, John O'Keefe is, to your knowledge, not outside.
To my knowledge, I believed he was on the way to the hospital.
Now, later on in the course of that day, at some point, did you have occasion to speak with some troopers from the state police?
Yes.
And if you recall, who is it that you spoke with?
So I spoke with Trooper, last name Proctor, and then another trooper, and I don't know the last name, first name Yuri.
Would it be Sergeant Buchanan?
It could be.
And had you met either of those troopers prior to that day?
I had never met Trooper Proctor. I had met Trooper, I forget, what is the last name?
You met Trooper Yuri?
Yuri. I had met him once or twice before.
Was that in a professional capacity?
Yes.
And where did you speak with him on that day?
At my sister-in-law Jen's house.
And if you recall, about what time of day was it that you spoke with him?
It was late morning, early afternoon, the day of the incident. So I don't know the exact time. Before noon, I think.
And why was it that later on that day that you were over your sister-in-law Jennifer McCabe?
Well, my sister-in-law Jen and her husband Matt were leaving my house. My sister-in-law was distraught. I wanted to be comforting to them and be there for them if they needed anything, and I drove to their house.
And this is, and speaking of your sister-in-law Jennifer, this is someone you've known since she was how old?
7 years old. She's like a little sister to me.
And at the point that you're going over to the house, did you know that there were going to be troopers from the state police over at the house?
Yes.
And fair to say they asked to talk to you, is that correct?
Yes.
And do you know who, if anyone else, they spoke to at your sister-in-law's house that day?
I believe they spoke with Jen, my sister-in-law Jen, and then her husband Matt, and then myself.
And so was that done sort of in a group setting or was it separate or something?
Separate.
And so they spoke to you in one area of the house while Jennifer and Matthew McCabe were in another area of the house and vice versa for you?
Yes, I spoke with them at the dining room table, and Jen and Matt were not present. I believe they may have been upstairs or somewhere else in the house.
And if you know, where were you when the troopers were talking to either Jennifer McCabe or Matt?
So I was upstairs when they were being spoken to.
If I may have one moment, Norm?
Yes.
May I approach, Norm?
Yes.
I'm going to show you a series of 8 photographs that you review them and look up.
Sure.
So what I've just presented you what's been previously marked as exhibits 58 through 65, and generally speaking, do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes.
And what do you recognize?
So the photos appear to be the front yard in front of my old house at 34 Fairview Road.
And from those photographs, they appear to be a fair and accurate portrayal of what your house and your yard looked like around that time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask to publish those for the jury to discuss with the witness briefly.
Hey, you can put them up, Ms. Gilman.
Ms. Gilman, if you could start with exhibit 58. Mr. Albert, sir, there should be on the desk in front of you a laser pointer. Actually, we already.
I have that, yes.
So what's up on the screen currently, do you recognize, is that what's depicted in exhibit 58?
Let's see. I have them out of order here. Just give me 1 sec. So yes, this looks like the photo exhibit 58 that you handed me.
And this is a photograph of your house, or if I'm standing on the street to the left side of the property, correct?
Yes.
And on this sort of left side of your property, let me ask you this first. As far as between the roadway of Fairview Road and your front lawn, is there anything there as far as a sidewalk or anything like that?
No, there's no sidewalk. So the grass area goes right to the curb, and then there's the street.
And the curb that's in between the grass and the roadway, is that like a straight curb, a straight edge curb, granite curbing, or like rounded curbing? How would you describe that?
I would just describe it as a regular curbing. It's not granite. It's the color is black, so it seems like a tar curbing.
And in this area of the left side of your property, what, if anything, of note is sort of in that area of the property?
So in that area of the property, first of all, that's basically the property line from the neighbor's house. If you're staring at my house from the front, the neighbor to the left, that's the property line area. But there's a fire hydrant there. There is a flagpole with the American flag and the Marine Corps flag. And there is we call it like an electrical box, but I'm not sure what the purpose of it is.
And so for all the years that you've lived there, either as a child or as an adult, you really don't know what that electrical box does or what it is?
Yes, I don't know if it's operable. Sometimes the door is open. If it's windy, the door of the box blows open, and sometimes it's closed, and, we don't really have much to do with it.
And the general area where, when you looked out the window in your bedroom on the morning of the 29th, as far as where you saw the police vehicles or the cruisers, do you see that in this photograph?
Yes, that's the same general area.
The same general area as you were describing with the fire hydrant, flagpole, things like that.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next exhibit 59. And again, sir, what's up on the screen? Is that what you have before you?
What was it, 59? Yes.
And from this photograph, sir, this is again a picture of your residence around the time of January 29th, correct?
Yes.
Fair to say this is taken after some of the snow has sort of melted from the storm before?
Yes, it appears that there's less snow in the front there.
So less snow than what you saw when you looked out your window or at some later point on the 29th.
Yes.
And from this photograph, if you could just direct the jury's attention to the driveway and the garages and sort of where is that located?
So my driveway was this area right here, and that's the garage doors.
And from within this photograph as well, you mentioned that there was sort of two doors to the front of your house, one that leads into a foyer area and the other leads into a living room of some kind. If you could direct the jury's attention to where each of those doors would be on the house.
Sure. So the door right here we consider it the front door, and that goes into a foyer area. And then, not from this photo, you can't really see it, but there's a door in this, I guess, breezeway area, and that opens up into the family room.
And one last thing from this photograph, sir, if the window that you were looking out, see that window in this photograph as well, and can you draw the jury's attention? Yes,
I believe it would be this one right here, in the corner.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next exhibit, number 60.
You say 60?
60. And sir, what's up on the screen? Do you recognize that as what you have before you as exhibit 60?
Yes.
And from this photograph, as far as the roadway and the sort of width of the road from the curb to the double yellow line there, is that generally what it was on January 29th, that's what the roadway looked like?
The morning of the 29th?
Well, the morning of the 29th, it was snow, correct?
Right. So the roadway, I believe, would have had some snow on it.
So what I'm asking is, when you came home that evening or early morning on the 29th, is that essentially what the roadway looked like, absent whatever the snow was covered?
Yes.
The next photograph, Ms. Gilman. And again, now looking at what is exhibit 61, is that correct, sir?
One second. Yes.
This is essentially a closer up image of the area of the fire hydrant and electrical box and the flagpole that we were talking about before.
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next photograph. And again, what's up on the screen, this would be, and I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Is this 62?
62. It appears to be, yes, 62.
So you were mentioning earlier in your testimony that the area where you saw the police cruisers when you looked out the window on the morning of the 29th was near sort of where your property abuts the neighboring property, correct?
Yes.
And do you happen to know what number that next door neighbor's house is? up or down from 34?
I honestly don't. I don't know what number that is.
And do you see sort of the property line in between your house and the next door neighbor's?
Yes, I believe that row of trees is the property line.
So the row of evergreen trees there is sort of where it delineates between your property and the next door neighbor.
Yes, they appear to be in line from almost the street to the white fence.
And that white fence sort of in the back right of that photograph, is that the fence that you were talking about before that encloses your backyard?
Yes.
And the next photograph is coming, number 63. Again, this is just another photograph of sort of that area of your yard, is that correct?
1 second. Sorry. Yes.
Now, with reference to this area of the yard at your house when you were living there at 34 Fairview Road, is that an area of the yard that would be of particular use, or did you go in that area of the yard all that much?
No, we didn't really use that area too often. There's a large wood chip bed. You can't see it because of the snow, but it kind of covers that area. So we don't really go over there that often.
And now, so with reference to this area of the yard, was there any sort of overhead, like ambient lighting, street lights, anything like that in that area?
No, so that's a very dark part of the yard. There's no street light there at all.
And the next photograph, Ms. Gilman, Mr. Albert, I believe this would be number 64, is that correct?
Yes.
And with reference to this, can you describe to the jury what are we looking at in this particular photograph? It's Exhibit 64.
So that's the front right door, I guess you could say, to the house. And again, you can't see the door, but it's inside that breezeway area to the left.
If you could, just using the laser point direct.
Oh, yeah.
What you're talking about.
So the door would be right in here.
And from the driveway leading up to that front door area you were talking about with the foyer once you get in, what, if anything, is sort of leading you up to the steps there?
To the other door,
To the other, to the front?
there's a brick walkway.
So brick walkway leading up the brick steps into the foyer area of your house.
Yes.
And the last in this set, Ms. Gilman, Mr. Albert, this would be number 65. Do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph, sir?
Yes.
And what do you recognize?
So that's the picture of the ground in front of the fire hydrant, which is to the left front of my yard.
You can take that down. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Albert, with the days that sort of follows from January 29th, as far as your home was concerned, what, if any, sort of police presence did you observe or notice sort of in that area in the front yard of your home?
So over the course of the next couple of days, there were emergency vehicles and police personnel that day and days following in front of the house.
So later on in the afternoon of the 29th and continuing on for days after, is that correct?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you observe as far as the weather was concerned between the date of the 29th and the days that the police presence was outside of your house?
I believe it rained a few times during that time.
And as far as the snow that had been piled up on your front lawn, what, if anything, was occurring with the snow as the days went on following the 20th?
I believe so. Some of the snow was shoveled out, I believe, during the crime scene, and then some of the snow was just dissipating due to the fact that it was melting and it had rained a bunch of days.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to your house, and obviously at some point you moved from the house on Fairview in Canton to Norwood, correct?
Yes.
And when was that sort of first discussed between you and your wife as far as selling the house?
That was discussed in October, November of, it would have been 2021.
What was it that sort of precipitated that discussion as far as selling the house?
Around that time, and it was post-COVID, the housing market seemed really good. And my brother, Chris, had sold his house, was in the process, and ultimately sold his house around that time. He got a great deal on it. I had known some other people that had sold around that time. And it was a little early for us because our children weren't all necessarily gone yet, but it was close, and we thought we could get a good deal for the house. So that's when we started exploring it.
And who, if anyone, did your brother Christopher put you in touch with?
So he put me in touch with a realtor that ultimately sold his house.
And at some point you sold the house?
I did.
And when was that?
So we didn't end up selling until April of 2023.
And as far as prior to selling the house, what, if any, did the sale of your house have anything to do with what occurred there on January 29th, 2020?
Absolutely not.
May I have just one moment now?
Yes.
I have nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
All right. Can I see Counsel Sidebar for just a second, please? Albert, you can step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, so Joyce, rather than start cross-examination of Mr. Albert, we're going to let you break for the day. And I did want to give you some scheduling updates because there have been questions from you folks and requests. So originally, so next week will be a full week. We're here every day next week. Again, Monday, Wednesday, Friday will be full days. I'd like us to pick up the pace a little bit here, no repetitive testimony so that we can move things along, but we are moving things along. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday will be full days. Tuesdays and Thursday next week will be half days. The week I wanted to address with you, where we were already going to be off the 29th and 31st of that week. There's been a request and it makes sense. We will now take the 29th, 30th, and 31st off rather than have you folks come in. So you'll get 3 full days, sort of maybe in the middle of this trial, to be able to just kind of regroup. And I figured everybody would welcome those days, but I am going to ask you to give us a full day on the 28th. So think about that this weekend. So the Tuesday will be a full day, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you'll be down, okay? June 7th, we're off. We will end June 6th at noon instead of 1 o'clock. Okay. All right. So I do have to give you those 3 cautions. Please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into this case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case, please disregard it. I always like to tell jurors, just leave everything here. Your notebooks, literally, figuratively, just leave it here. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you Monday morning.
Rise for the jury.
Here we go. Thank you.
One session. Any other evidentiary issues I should be prepared to spend some time on this weekend?
Literally, there's
Not from the Commonwealth, no.
ridiculous.
No, we can wait on that.
I heard you say we can wait on that, but I'd like to know, is there anything that I should be taking a look at?
Right, no, I wasn't, I was talking about something different. I think with regard to Brian Albert, there's really nothing other than I wanted to talk to my co-counsel over the weekend to get the court to potentially revisit the ruling that you just made, which whether you do or you don't, Your Honor, I think you've heard, we can hear more potential. But with regard to Caitlin Albert, Your Honor, there is the issue of the photos between her and Katie McLaughlin. I just wanted to flag that for the court. I think we've addressed that already, and I think the court had said we'd take them on a photo-by-photo basis.
No, what I said is you need to approach. So
Yeah.
before she testifies, let me know where we stand.
Will do.
Okay? Or before your cross-examination.
Will do.
All right. Do we expect to hear from her next week?
Yes,
Okay.
I think probably Monday.
probably Monday.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Thank
No,
you.
Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, so of course we ended early, right? Because like, what's a full day? What's a full day of this trial? That does not exist. And it's not, like we wasted an hour on Turtle Boy or anything today. So literally, what the fuck? Any questions, comments, or concerns before we get off of here? We will reconvene next week. We will talk on TikTok Lives. Members, we're about to have a phone call to talk about this same as we do every day after live watch. Any last minute questions, comments, or concerns before we, thank God, are done with this for this week? All right. Well, digest all the fuckery that we heard today, and then we will discuss it on late night tonight. So go digest all of this, members. We are about to do a members call, so I will see you guys over there. Otherwise, digest the fuckery that we have just heard, and we will discuss it later on a late night, probably on TikTok, maybe on here, to be determined. Have a wonderful rest of your Fuckery Friday, and I will see you guys later on.